Yeah, what's up everyone? Welcome to Season 1, Episode 10 of the LumEd podcast. Today we are talking with Nick Rado, a New Zealand comedian who is a writer for 7 Days, a local TV show here, and he is also 4 times champion for the best MC here in New Zealand. So we thought it was quite important to be able to get him on the show and talk about his creative process, what he does to get into the ebbs and flows and get out of writer's blocks, and be able to create some really good quality content day in, day out. So sit back, enjoy, and I hope you find this insightful. I don't know if you've ever had KFC in Nelson, but essentially level 0, KFC in Nelson was level 4 anyway.
Oh, right.
Because of the amount of time it took to get through your food. So we're used to level 4. Yeah,
I did hear about that actually. Weirdly I haven't had KFC in Nelson, but I'm going to indulge.
So Nick, you've managed to bunker down back in the promised land of the top of the south. Do you want to tell us what lockdown life has been like for you for the past 4 weeks at least?
Yeah, so my story was, I was living in Stoke in Nelson, and we basically I got the call up, like the big career break. I am a huge fan of sports, and obviously from my background is comedy and stand-up and writing jokes, and I got this opportunity to work on Australian Fox Sports show called The Narrow World of Sports, which was going to be this brand new comedy sports show, which was going to be sort of 28 weeks of the year in winter, and then there's going to be like a cricket version of it, about 8 to 10 episodes over the summer. So it was about 36 to 38 episodes of me being on Australian television and telling jokes to the nation of Australia, and then also I think Sky was going to pick it up in New Zealand, so it was this massive break for the whole family. So it managed to sell the house and put our stuff into a container and move over to Sydney, and my wife and my kids, they were going to live in Richmond for like maybe 3 weeks just so I can get houses and my job sorted before they came over. And then coronavirus hit, and I did 1 episode, and then all of our stuff is in, literally as we speak, all of our 4-bedroom house worth of stuff is in a container in Sydney Customs, and me and my family are in Richmond and Nelson, self-isolating with the in-laws. So that's my situation at the moment.
And definitely with the in-laws.
Yeah.
Are you 4th on the pecking order in the house now? 4th or 5th?
No, I think I'm 6th. There's 6 of us here, so I think 7th because there's a cat. So, I feel, because I came in late, because I came in from Sydney, so I had to self-isolate before we even went into lockdown. So I haven't talked to another human being outside of my bubble for I think 5 or 6 weeks now. It's very interesting parenting and just living in someone else's house. Like, I've got this rule of about 2 or 3 days staying over at people's houses. We sort of outstay your welcome, and we've been here for about 5 weeks with 2 young kids awesome as well. So a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So that's exciting.
We were chatting before, and for those who don't know, the last time that we chatted to Nick in person was at the Nelson Business Awards. Nick did an amazing job emceeing those awards and actually managed to slip us a little deal under the counter and get us a win for the category.
It was interesting. It was Nelson Business, a huge award for the local area, huge night for the local area, and some big businesses there as well, like million, and I would say I want to say billion, but who knows what some of the different big industries there, like King Salmon, they're like 50% of the world's salmon they provide. So I'm imagining it's a huge number that they get involved with. And so just reading out these huge names and big names, and then I saw LumEd's name appear on the list, and I was like, oh, okay, this is exciting. I know these boys. And then, because on the sheet, it just says the nominees, and then over on the other sheet, it was like, oh, here's the winner. And I sort of just was going to just say your guys' name out anyway, because no one was going to question it, and yeah, and it would have been too embarrassing for them to stop the award ceremony. So I reckon we've gotten away with it for about 3 or 4 months now, boys. So no one's asked for the award back, have they?
Yeah, it's going well for us so far.
Yeah, great.
I imagine it's going to look very different this year. Considering everything that's going on, but I know they were mixing up the categories. I reckon this year's awards will just be they'll give out awards for which businesses are left. Congratulations to these 5 for surviving this whole process. You're still emerging, so to speak. You're still under 2 years. June 10 is when we have emerged.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, when do you surface as a business?
You know, you said before you're almost heading into this big break. It's like this new season of your life that was cut short, and then you've really had to take a big step back to Nelson, and now you're almost at ground zero again in the sense of your location.
Yeah.
Like, how has that been for you, and what have you sort of been processing to move into the next season, leaving lockdown?
Yeah, so the big thing for me was that it was a huge break. Like, I'd had different big things happen, and they sort of went up and down, but they'd only be for like 6 weeks or 2 months or some sort of thing. But this was like a big, if I played my cards right, it was like a big 2, 3, 4 year type situation, and we were going to move. Like, you don't really uproot and move your family for, you know, just an off chance. And so that was the big thing. So in my mind and in our headspace, we had already moved our family, and our lives were going to be over in Sydney. So that was a huge mental effort to go there in the first place. And then now we're back, and we've had to sort of recalibrate, and it's been up and down. It's been like kind of, you know, it's hard. It would be easy to kind of like go, oh, well, it was me, and this is my life now, and I'm never gonna, you know, get back there type thing. But it's been all about trying to create something that is a little bit more concentrating on the things that I can control. So the things that I can control, I didn't lose the job or the gig because of my talent or because it was something that I did. It was basically things that were out of my control, and this is what a lot of people sort of have to remember, I think, in this time, is to not lose confidence in what you do, and to not, just because you are not doing the things that you normally do doesn't mean that you've lost that trick, or you've lost that talent, or you've lost that ability to be nailing it before this whole situation happened. The landscape's changed a lot, and we'll have to adapt to that. But with my respect, my whole livelihood got wiped out. So I earned money from TV writing, stand-up comedy. I even did gigs on cruise ships, comedy on cruise ships. So like all of those different things were wiped out in like the first week. So I was like, okay, well I can't do those things anymore. So I had to sort of go back to a lot of the basics when I was starting out in stand-up. So I've been doing stand-up for about 15 years, and the first 6 or 7 years was just like, oh, this is, you know, I'm doing it for the love of it rather than the money side of things. And a lot of businesses sort of start out like that. And so I feel like I've sort of had to go back to that sort of grassroots level of like, okay, well, what do I really want to do? What are the passion projects that I really am passionate about, and then trying to sort of recreate those things. So for me, what makes me super happy is my family, when I have a focus, and fitness and funny. Those are my 4 little F's that I sort of like. Whenever I'm doing those things, I'm really like loving life. I had to do things that enabled me to get into that headspace. So what I would do is I had to come up with a morning routine and a daily routine that I would do every day, so that I could create, and I could get into the mind space and the headspace to be not only a good creative person, but to also be strong enough to put that work out there. And so I started with basically in the mornings I do this thing. I every morning now for like the last year and a bit, I've done cold showers, and so I get up in the morning and I have to get into this cold shower, and I hate doing it, but to have that motivation to go to the next level when you are a bit tired, or you are feeling a bit down, or something like COVID-19, ruins the big opportunity that you'd been working towards. It's basically for me a kickstart in the morning to go, all right, we've done these 3 things, we've already achieved something for today. Now, if I can do those things, then sending an email or sitting down to write this thing that I actually want to do, it's a no-brainer really for me. I've started up this thing called Comedian Catch Up. So it was it's like a YouTube sort of comedian show. I was the head writer for a TV3 show called 7 Days, which is like basically a topical news panel show where we take the mickey out of the week's news. And so I've been writing jokes for that for years, like over 250 episodes of that. And so I've got a lot of skills, but I've also got a lot of connections with a lot of comedians as well. And my sort of local colleagues, I guess you say, are very funny comedians who want to chat about different things and have got funny angles and funny points of view on some pretty serious topics at the moment. And so what I wanted to do was to keep my brain into that joke writing situation, but also catching up with my friends. And I thought, well, why not? Let's record it. Let's put it out there and let's make some content. Now, the hardest thing for me is that I'm not very this is gonna shock you guys, we're not very technical minded, so
wow.
So my natural go-to is ideas, creation, that kind of thing. And so where I use up a lot of energy and a lot of time is doing things that I'm not so passionate about, and so I can't sort of work out quickly. I can make a joke very quickly. I can structure, a sitcom, or I can sit down and write a TV show for hours on end, and it just feels like it's nothing to me. But if you kind of say like, okay, you got to sit and work out how this video editing program works, or how to code this different thing, or how to upload this to that, my brain kind of wanders off and goes, oh, it's not really something that I'm interested in. But in this time, going back to the cold shower scenario, it's like, all right, you don't want to do this, and it's going to be kind of tough during the middle of it, but at the other end, on the other side of it, you're gonna have this thing that you can now do a little bit easier, and it enables you to actually do what you want to do and be passionate about, which is to for me to put this content out there. And so I've had a lot of that. I've had a lot of like wanting to throw the laptop in the wall because I don't understand it, because it's like, for some reason it's not working. But now I've learnt those mistakes, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well actually I can do this, and you surprise yourself a little bit and go, all right, well if I can do this, now the next level is this. And it kind of stems from my stand-up roots. Like everyone wants to be on stage and, gigging at Hammersmith Apollo or being on national TV or that kind of stuff. But the 7 or 8 years of me just like dying on stage, or just being rubbish at it, or being like just okay at it, and then struggling through that, and then going to the other side where people are wanting to pay money to come and see you, and to go, hey, do you want to come and do a sports comedy show in Australia, and we'll fly your family over, and all that kind of stuff. There's rewards to that, and there's things to it. But if I wasn't passionate about it, I wouldn't have got to the level I was. But equally, if I didn't do that equivalent of that cold shower as a metaphor in the morning, of staying in instead of going out with my mates on a Saturday night because like you guys got to edit this thing, or we've got to finish this business proposal, or the things that you got to do in accounts so that people that you've hired have paid, all these things that you don't really want to do, but if I do them now, and if I get ahead of them and I can do it, I can conquer those things, then it enables you to do the things that you really want to do later.
For all the creatives listening and watching this, What are some practical things that you might do just to reset, to help you get out of that writer's block, or just help the flow of creativity even after you've done that morning routine?
I have a thing where John Cleese, who is Monty Python, one of the Monty Python group, and did Fawlty Towers and a lot of great comedy situation. They have this writing philosophy which I go off, and it's which I use, and it's an hour and a half. And so basically what happens is the first half an hour is you saying, is your brain going, oh yeah, I've got to do that shopping list, or yeah, I should really do that website, or I've got that tax thing to do. And then the second half an hour of the hour and a half is like, yeah, I've got nothing here. Why am I doing this? I'm not good enough to do this. Why am I even, attempting to do this? And then the last half an hour is like, yeah, there's something here. That's okay. And then after an hour and a half, you get tired. You run out of energy. You can't just you need to have a break, and that's where you go have lunch, go for a walk, have some, just away time, just go in the garden to play with the kid, do whatever you got to do, but don't, because you've set that timer of an hour and a half, sure, if you're just cracking into it, just don't stop, like keep going. If you're in that moment, sometimes you'll do 2 hours, sometimes you get to an hour 10 and you're like, I guess can't. But I just, every day, or 5 days, so for me, 5 days a week, an hour and a half is like timer. And even if I'm just sitting there and looking into space for the last 20 minutes of it, at least I've sat through that time and got to it. And what will happen is when you go away, things will percolate later on. So as you're doing the dishes, when you're playing the kids, or whatever, ideas will come to you, and you'll solve things when it's just bubbling away in the background. An hour and a half, 5 days a week is better than doing like 2 or 3 weeks of 9 to 5. Right. Because I don't know, you just can't do it. I think creativity is like it's like a puzzle. It's just like getting different pieces and joining them and different connecting dots and things like that. And so when you see and hear and do other things, you start to, your creative mind just sort of starts to explode. The other thing is the mentality of just know that you're good, and know that you're listen, if you're not going to back yourself, no one will. So you have to, you have to. It's imperative that you're really lenient on yourself, and that you're your number one encourager.
Hey everyone, wanted to quickly let you know where you can find more of Nick Rado online. You can check out his website right here, on Instagram right here, Facebook right here, or even YouTube right here. Check out his YouTube channel. He's been interviewing some other comedians during lockdown, and you'll find something in there that might give you a little bit of a giggle. Be sure to stick around, there's plenty more content to come.
Do you have any ideas or advice or tips that you could give people who are perhaps struggling putting themselves on the line and putting their work out there because they're just really scared about how it's going to be received? And I guess comedy is like, you're basically naked in front of people because it's you're the product. Do you have any advice for people just freaking out about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, So that's one of the greatest things I love about comedy, is especially stand-up comedy. Like I find the video aspect in like YouTube and creating sketches and all that kind of stuff, I find that that's actually harder for me personally, because when I'm standing up on stage and I tell a joke, then I know for a fact that that's worked because they're laughing. Or if it didn't work, I'm like, oh, okay, that I need to work on that, or I can, tweak that wording or whatever. It's instant feedback. It's an instant review, or it's an instant learning for me. But
that's me 99% of the time.
Right. Yeah.
My feedback is silence.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So for me, it's like, it's hard to put yourself out there, but you either win or you learn, basically, and is my mentality. One-hit wonders, like who we see as like, the MC Hammer, You Can't Touch This, or like Gangnam Style songs and that kind of stuff. They just didn't write one song and go, wow, that's great, and then step back and let the millions of things in again, and then just give up. Like that's not how it happens. So in order for him to get to that level, or those people to get to those levels, you just have to put stuff out to know what works and what doesn't work, and tweak and things like that. Like Henry Ford has this amazing quote where he says, like, failure is an amazing chance to start again more intelligently. And I feel like that for me is, you have to go in with that mentality. Today we're looking over at some wedding photos of me and my wife, and I was like, how did you marry the version of me, then? I was like, I feel like I've grown, and again, I can offer so much more to you now as a person than what that guy was back then. And we're always going to be like that in our careers, in our actual, home lives and all that kind of stuff. It's better to have like 100 people, out of 100 people, 10% loving it and 90% hating it, than you not releasing it, but you really liking it. Because there's like, what do you want, 100% of nothing or 10% of something is how you got to look at it. So and there's no way around it, I'm sorry to say, but it's I've had to learn it. I'm the same. I'm literally going through the same thing now. I haven't press released my comedian catch up to the big networks and stuff, because I personally feel like it's not quite there yet, but I'm just going to have to do it. Like next week, I've said to my wife, it's like, I'm just going to do it. If they pick it up, they pick it up. If they don't, they don't. So when you compare, or when you kind of like, what is it that you always have to kind of go, why am I doing this? What's my purpose? Why am I trying to get this stuff out there? And if you're staying true to that purpose, or staying true to that core of that passion, then people can kind of see it and smell it as well. I've done about 6 hours of comedy, and there's probably about 2 hours there's 3 hours where I'm like, that was really what I wanted to say and what I wanted to do. And there was 3 hours where I was like, I think this is what they want. And 2 of the ones that I put out, they ended up getting like nominated for awards and stuff. And then there was one that didn't get nominated for awards, but it was really, really well received in terms of numbers and people coming and going, oh, that's a good show type thing. And the other 3 were just sort of like, meh, it was just indifferent. And it was kind of like, yeah. And so I think as long as you know the reason is why you're putting it out there, of course your heart and soul, and you're going to be, you hurt if someone slags it off or what have you. But you just kind of go, oh, well, that wasn't for them. That was for you. So that was for me. It's something that I really, really passionate about.
It's a good point. I know for myself as a photographer, the moment where I felt like I could let go, sit in the comfort of my own identity as a creative, but also continue growing, is when I was able to not be so precious about my work, and let someone who I trusted and who I knew could critique my work, and I would take that feedback. But then I also wasn't worried about on the content that was being produced around me. I was just doing what I loved and producing something that I loved to produce. And to be honest, that's when my business took off. There was definitely a defining moment for me in that. So you can't put a method around exactly do this step 1, do this step 2, and then all of a sudden you're a successful artist doing all the art you work. It's such a identity thing right at the very core of who we are. But it's all a journey. We just got to pursue that journey, eh?
Yeah, totally agree. And so there was things that there were skill sets that I had as a comedian going into comedy that I had that other people didn't have, and they didn't have to work on. So for me, I came from like a public speaking sort of background and radio, and had confidence. I'd already gone through that thing of getting up on stage and wasn't so nervous chatting to people per se. And so I'd already sort of had that skill. But where I didn't have the skill was writing, telling jokes, becoming a storyteller and all that kind of stuff. So I had to work on all those different things and then learn those skill sets as I went on. Then I became like this really great sort of comedy MC where I could sort of riff and improvise and say, hey, what do you do? And then riff and chat about their job and what have you, and make funny things about that. And I became this person who's like, oh, he just MCs, and he's a great sort of off the cuff kind of guy, but he's not a very good writer. And so then I went away for 2 years and didn't do any MC work, and I just literally just said I'm only going to do 20-minute spots or half an hour spots and just concentrate on my writing. And then therefore I had, after that, then now I've got the ability to headline a show, to MC a show, to open a show, middle a show. But it took like 6-7 years to get to that level. But it was all about me and what was my identity and what my and they call it on stage is finding your voice, and sort of for me to get into my flow state and use all my tools. Like I talk about these, like the tools in my belt on a stage, so I can get on a stage and I've got about 6 or 7 tools, maybe 8 tools in my belt. And if I go out on a stage and then like you try the first tool and then they're like, oh, they didn't like that. Okay, well I've got another one here, and it's, you know, and then they don't like that. So okay, and then once you get to your 5th, 6th, normally I can sort of win them over because I've had that much experience. But when you're starting, you've got like one tool. Here it is. It's the hammer, but they're a screwdriver crowd, and you know, and then you're literally just hammering them with your one tool. But then you learn from that audience and go, all right, well I'm going to need a screwdriver to just in case this audience happens again. So then you add that to your tool belt, and it takes you years to master the screwdriver because, you know, it's a different, you know, it's just different action and so on and so forth. So I may have 6, 7, 8 tools in my belt, but people like, you know, Michael McIntyre or huge comedians, they might have 20 or 30 tools in their belt. But then people before them that probably had 40 or 50, like Billy Connolly's got 60, you know, whatever. And so different people have different sets of tools and different things, and they know how to use them at the different times. And, you know, yes, you've got all these tools, but then when do you use them? And it's just, you're always learning. But I feel like, as long as you stay true and find your own voice, that's when people will gravitate towards you. And I think that's where, people are kind of like dogs in a way. They can smell fear, they can smell confidence, they can smell if you're being genuine, or audiences, I should say, rather than people. But like, people who genuinely doing their own thing. I think people strive for that. It's such a hard thing to find and to nail as an artist.
One thing I really love about you're talking about you're finding your voice, but one thing I love about your voice and I guess your style is your comedy is so clean. And especially in the day and age where, in the Netflix generation where you've got so much stand-up coming out and it's so much, there's so much stand-up content which is easily accessible. There's just a lot of, I guess, crude comedy out there, so it's quite refreshing to see some clean content. For you, is there anything out there that inspires you, either to be clean in the content that you're delivering, and is there any other comedians that you look to draw inspiration, or is there a particular skit that you have as a draw card as a inspiration?
Yeah, so there was like, so I really liked Jerry Seinfeld when I was growing up, but just because he was the only thing, he was the first sort of comedian that we sort of got on terrestrial New Zealand television where it was like a sitcom, and I used to not watch his Seinfeld episodes for the show, but I watched it for the stand-up bits. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And he always worked clean. And there's an American comedian called Brian Regan who if I can recommend anybody to go watch, it's Brian Regan. He's absolutely hilarious, clean comic, and he's just hilarious. And so why I turned clean was because I wasn't getting certain. Well, maybe I got certain breaks, but I didn't sort of nail those breaks for whatever reason, and I wasn't maybe ready at the time, or didn't have enough tools in my belt, or if maybe I had the tools but I didn't know how to use them at the right times. And so a lot of doors sort of that were open or just creaking open suddenly became shut, and I was like, oh, okay, what am I going to do? There was different... there was a lot of wave in comedy, as well as getting more ethnic and female comedians onto different panels and things like that. And I was like, that's great, that's fantastic, we should all be for that. But as a white heterosexual middle class male, there's just sort of no real openings for me. So I was like, okay, well, there's my boulder, there's my like object, there's my cold shower, if you will, and it's like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I could wallow in it and go, woe is me, wait till the time comes around where maybe, you know, they do want me, or get bitter and twisted. Or do I go, well, what is it that I can do, or that is more me, is different, that people would like? And so I was sort of 80-90% clean anyway. And what I was finding is that when I would not be clean, people would be like, oh, I really loved your stuff up until that last bit where you sort of, you know, I wasn't expecting that from you. So, and then I was sort of, and that's advice, and that's sort of hurtful at the time, because they're basically saying, oh, you were okay, but you could have been better. And so that's when we sort of take on those things of you winning or you learn. So I didn't quite win that time. So I learnt that, okay, well, if I just stick to the clean stuff, then maybe that's an option. Maybe that's a thing. And then it's a lot harder to write, because there's still stuff I'm writing. I'm like, oh, that's a great bit. It's a fully formed bit, but it's, you know, it's just a little bit too crude, or it's a little bit whatever. So then now what I do is I have to spend so much more time to try and say the same thing, but without the crudeness of it, and it takes ages, and it's a lot long. It's more long-winded for me to write, but it's much more rewarding. And now I've just got more opportunities, like loads of corporate work, the cruise stuff, the Australian television things, that all of this stuff is come from me making the switch and going, oh, it's not only now I'm like the, you know, the white guy with the beard. It's Nick. He's the clean comic who does sports stuff, or whatever the niche, or whatever the stereotype they want to chuck on me. But that was my obstacle, and then now it gave me a point of difference. But it was still true to myself. It was still true to me, and I don't begrudge anyone doing crew comedy. I feel like it's hilarious. But it's just that for me, and finding my own way, that's what I've chosen. And maybe I'll go back to it. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. But for me, in this point in time now, it's I'm really enjoying it, and it's I enjoy the challenge of keeping it clean.
Yeah, it's great.
It's so great.
Keep doing it, mate.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
You were talking about having the mindset of, I know this is completely a sidestep to what we've just been talking about, which has been great. I'd be really keen for you to sort of explore that concept and talk about that mindset of, even if you are falling behind, or you're kind of getting lost in, maybe you haven't come out of this season as great as you would have hoped, but having the mindset of that 1% heading forward.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, totally. I had an analogy from my dad. Weirdly, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't like, oh, this pearl of wisdom that he passed on to me. He didn't even know he was saying it. He was literally just saying the literal meaning of it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of like, and that's why me and my dad are so different, because he's very literal, and I'm like kind of, and I sort of go off into this space of like, you know, metaphors, and this could mean this and stuff. And so we were literally I was trying to sell our old house, and we were pruning back the roses, and like I didn't really know how to do it, so he knew how to do it, and I was like, cool. And I said, well, what's the key to it? And he said, well, and he was literally talking about the rose bush, but I was like, oh, this is blowing my mind creatively. And he says, so in order for the roses to, you know, bloom and to be as spectacular as they were, and they were brilliant roses, he says they can't be like that all the time, because they're just gonna, like, they have like a time, and then they sort of wilt away and you know, look bad or whatever. But they can't recreate that by just leaving them, or just keep doing the same thing. So what he did with the rose bush is he literally like hacked it right back down to the roots. And I was like, you can't, like, well, what how's that going to help it? And he says, no, trust me, the way that I've cut it and the way that I've prepared it, in 6 months time, or whatever, how long it took for them to grow, you'll get another big massive bloom of these amazing roses, right? And I was like, oh, wow, that's such a great thing creatively. It's like, we can't be blooming all the time, because if you're blooming the whole time, you're literally there's not enough energy for you to be doing that. So occasionally, and I feel like this time, is we all just have to cut it back, right back down to the roots of what we're doing. Not giving up. It's not, saying that we're not going to have that time of blooming again. But at this time, it's like, no, this is the foundations process. This is the growing process. This is the XYZ process. And there is probably only about 10 or 15, 20% of our actual working careers and even our lives where we're like going, remember that when we were like nailing it, smashing it. But that's when people burn out, and that's people when like you're chasing like this impossible dream. And you can do that financially too, like stock markets, whatever. You can't just be blooming the whole time. You've got to cut back. You've got to go back to these roots. And I feel like that's that mentality for me of course we want to be in that creating and earning of that top 1 or 10% or whatever it is, and be smashing it the whole time. But just be easy on yourself and go, well, what is this time? What are we trying to aim here? And is this a regrowing stage? Is this a like, no, we're almost at the blooming stage. Let's kick on. Let's push. But whatever that is for you, that would be my thing.
Mate, you dropped an absolute nugget, a gold nugget just before, and it's something that Joshua and I heard a speaker recently talk about. And I guess it was in the context of serving, but it was all about being. It's okay to be on the bench, because it's on the bench where you revive, you refuel, you eat your oranges. Yeah. But for a creative person, I think it's just like what you were saying. And if you're using the game analogy, like being on the bench is like a great place to be, because you're going to come out stronger and you're going to come out with fresh ideas. So it's about giving yourself permission that it's okay to not to be blooming.
Absolutely. And you can see the game as well. You can kind of like, you can see stuff and go, all right, well, when I get out there, this is what I'm going to do. And that's invaluable as well, because you can see it from a different perspective. You're not literally in the rat race of like, I've got to do this, the ball's coming over here. You can actually see it from like a coach or a thing, and have a ponder about it and go, well, this is where we've been going wrong the whole time, or this is what we'll do differently. I don't know if it'll work, but we'll try it anyway. But I think that's the number one thing. But it was by no means a philosophical, meant to be philosophical, but I just took it. That's where my brain goes. So I was just like,
that's great. Well, it was a nugget, so thank you for that.
That's all good. We finally got there.
So there we have it. That was Nick Rado, an inspirational guy, someone who is willing to provide some laughs. So be sure to check out all of his content online. That is episode 10. We have episode 11, which is the conclusion to season 1, coming up in a few weeks. So if you want to see that, feel free to like, subscribe, watch us, follow us wherever you can on all the social channels, and you'll see that one coming up. But I hope that's been somewhat of value to you and is helping you in your creative endeavors. We'll see you soon.